High carbon dioxide levels are driving up global temperatures, causing extreme weather and rising sea levels. But it's also changing the chemistry of our food as crops become higher in calories, but have far less nutrition. So, what does this mean for the future of the world's health? Hello and welcome to Roundtable. I'm Enda Brady. Now, over the last decade, the burning of fossil fuels, widespread deforestation and industrial growth have all taken carbon dioxide levels to record highs. Now, a new study shows an increase in CO2 is also lowering the nutritional content of our food. It comes as climate change is already impacting global crop yields.
The world's agriculture has already become vulnerable to climate change, with extreme weather causing drought, wildfires, and even increasing the number of sinkholes appearing in fields. But there are also unseen impacts on our food supply. Researchers from Leiden University in the Netherlands have found that as carbon dioxide levels rise, the nutritional density of major crops, including wheat, rice, potatoes and tomatoes, declines. Although CO2 is needed for plants to grow, excess amounts act like a steroid for plants, enabling them to grow bigger and faster. But this rapid growth means they can't absorb as many nutrients from the soil.
If you increase the carbon dioxide levels, then you will dilute the nitrogen levels in a crop. And that means that you get less protein produced. These crops not only provide you with carbohydrates, but they also provide you with protein and other minerals as well.
According to the research, wheat grown under high CO2 levels contains significantly less protein, zinc and iron, but did contain more calories. This can result in a dangerous phenomenon known as hidden hunger, a form of malnutrition.
We call it hidden hunger because it often exists without dramatic or obvious clinical signals, especially early on. So, for example, people may look fine and still have micronutrients and gaps that affect how their body functions. And the reason why this is so important is because micronutrients support basic systems, so immune function, growth and development, pregnancy outcomes, brain and nerve function, etc. And when our intakes are low, people have a higher susceptibility to infections, lower energy or poorer recovery from illnesses, for example.
Heavy metals such as lead have also been found in crops, a substance that's toxic even at very low levels and can harm the brain, heart and nervous system. As the world struggles with the growing dangers of climate change impacting food security and now nutrition, how can we respond and adapt?
Well, let's bring in our guests in Bonn, in Germany. I'm joined by Matin Qaim, Executive Director at the Centre for Development Research and Professor of Agricultural Economics at the University of Bonn. In Cambridge, in England, we have Sumantra Shumone Ray, a medical doctor and public health nutritionist. He's also the founder of the NEDPro, Global Institute for Food, Nutrition and Health in Cambridge. And in Baltimore, Maryland, in the US, we have Ziska. He's Associate Professor in Environmental Health Sciences at Columbia University's Mailman School of Public Health. You're all very welcome to this roundtable. First of all, Matin, to you, we've known for a very long time that CO2 levels rising affect climate change and sea levels, but this impact on our food is less visible, but very, very concerning.
It is concerning indeed. I mean, even today we're seeing that harvests are not as they used to be or as we would predict them to be without climate change. We have warmer climates on average. We have more weather extremes. And that is changing yield levels, and it's changing also the composition of crops in terms of the nutrient contents, especially micronutrients.
And to you, Shumone, I mean, when we go shopping for our fruit and vegetables, a carrot still looks like a carrot. A broccoli still looks like a lump of broccoli, but something really is changing here.
Yes, I think really the publication of a new study just last month has been a bit of a flashpoint in reminding us that when we look at data modeled over many years, that actually as carbon dioxide levels rise, on one hand, you might think that that's actually quite good for how plants grow, so the process of photosynthesis, so they grow bigger, faster. But on the other hand, what seems to be happening is a relative dilution, if you like, of the nutrient content within edible plants, i.e., the crops that we rely on for our food and nutrition. And that basically means that we could simply be consuming a little bit more in the way of empty calories in order to get essential nutrients and micronutrients in particular.
Lewis, to you, how concerned are you about this?
Well, we're quite concerned, as was mentioned, we're seeing this imbalance between carbon going up in the air and having more of it available for the plants. But we're not seeing a similar increase in terms of soil-based nutrients such as magnesium, zinc, iron, nitrogen, and so forth. So the concern is that because of this imbalance, we're going to have a number of health related impacts that could concern shortages of zinc or shortages of iron, which are very important in terms of human health.
Just to you on that, Matin, how worried are you about the fact that this is happening, but the public, I don't think, are very much aware that food is not as nutritious as it used to be?
Right. I mean, you don't taste iron and zinc easily. So that's really something that people wouldn't realize. And it's already getting worse. It's already measurable, and it's going to get worse further with rising CO2 concentrations. We already have a situation where about a third of the world population suffers from iron and zinc deficiencies and all the deficiencies and other micronutrients. And these are truly important for the health, but also for the mental and physical development, especially for children. And having too low levels of these micronutrients in critical time windows means that they are irreversible problems for body development. And that's serious. It's going to hamper long-term human development, and it's something that we really need to be not only concerned about, but also think about and implement strategies to avoid the worst from happening.
Shumone, talk to me about supplements then, because at some point, I think wealthier nations, middle class people with money to burn will just buy supplements, but that's not going to be possible for many families in many countries.
So I think a food first approach is what we tend to follow in human nutrition. And within that food first approach, our primary objective is to strengthen the backbone of dietary intake so that essential macronutrients, including protein, but also micronutrients, vitamins, and minerals in particular, are primarily supplied through the diet. Now, we're going to need to increase awareness within the human nutrition and clinical communities in order to counsel individuals and populations to actually choose their sources of nutrients in a way where they are able to potentially compensate for this supply deficit. I do not think it means that we should rush to recommend supplements to one and all. Of course, where there is a risk of chronic insufficiency or deficiency, there is absolutely a role for supplements, but I think we need to work on strengthening the backbone of dietary patterns and also doing that at an affordable cost so that some of the most marginalized are not disproportionately affected. But I would like to say that the matter is not as simplistic as we might think. There are various mechanistic issues that we need to take into consideration. So first and foremost, I think there needs to be greater understanding of the science before we think about the nuanced implications on society.
Lewis, can I ask you, how much blame do you think modern farming methods should be taking for what's happening to our food?
It's a difficult question, in part because in order to get the kinds of yields that we get, we tend to rely on genetic uniformity. That is, if I'm a farmer and I have 400 acres to harvest, I can't plant five different varieties of rice or five different varieties of corn with a variation in terms of nutrition. I have to rely on a single variety, and as a result of that, I tend to have a very limited range in terms of the nutritional content of what it is that I'm harvesting. That doesn't mean that there isn't room for improvement. And there are ways that we could begin to do genetic selection among different cereals, for example, that vary with respect to things like zinc and iron that would improve nutrition. But there's also room at the policy end in the sense that if I'm a government and I have the ability to offer an incentive, let's say a dollar extra that will pay for a bushel of rice that has a little bit extra zinc to it, that can also be an incentive at the policy level to begin to improve nutrition. So there are ways to begin to approach this, but the caveat is that in order to maintain those yields, we're really going to have to be smart about that combination of both yield and nutritional integrity when it comes to dealing with the rise in carbon dioxide. Not only the recent rise, but of course the future rise in CO2 by the end of the century.
Thanks, Lewis. Matin, to you, do you think then that we've had this obsession with quantity, yields, growing more, and we've really neglected the quality of what we're producing?
Yes, but it's not that simple. It's not either or. Obviously, we need the quantities as well because demand for food and other agricultural products continues to grow. We see that climate change and weather extremes are also hurting yield levels, especially in low and middle income countries where demand is greatest. So we cannot now say, let's get away from the quantity and only look at quality. We need to look at quality, but we need to bring that together with quantity. And obviously, technology is an integral part of the solution. We need to breed crops for both higher micronutrients, but at the same time also high yields, which are going to be needed to nourish the world population.
Shumone, what nutritional advice would you give to people watching then who are worried that what they're giving their children, their families, isn't good enough?
So I really think that nutrition obviously is the physiological status in the body that we achieve depending on what we eat. And really, what we want to avoid is any part of what we call this double burden of malnutrition. So, really, avoiding the risk of undersupply of protein and energy. Or oversupply, indeed, and at the same time, simultaneously avoiding micronutrient deficiencies. So, really knowing where food comes from, what the relative proportions of different nutrients are in different food groups, and ensuring that we have a great variety of particularly plant based foods, which meet about 130% of our prescribed nutrient or micronutrient requirements in particular, would be a kind of good backbone. But I would also say that we need to think about policy and how that can really help consumers, because food production doesn't directly result in food consumption. There are many steps in between. There's the food supply chain, there's food processing, food preparation. And in food preparation in particular, what we do in the kitchen to enhance the nutritional composition of what we're eating is another key consideration, which goes down to culinary awareness.
And Shumone, just on the issue of hidden hunger, explain that to our viewers, you know, what it means. People may be getting food, but still not enough.
Absolutely. So we've been thinking for many years about food security. So, how are we going to feed the planet so that there isn't hunger? But hidden hunger is where people are not perceiving hunger because they're getting enough food in quantities. They may even be getting enough energy in the form of calories. But what they're probably not getting enough of is essential micronutrients and, in some cases, also enough protein. And that hidden hunger is what we often use to refer to the third dimension of a triple burden of disease. So, undernutrition, obesity, but also this hidden hunger, particularly pertaining to micronutrient deficiencies. So, attending to all of these three tenets avoids that hidden hunger and moves us from food security more to nutrient security. And that is really, I think, the loop that closes part of this conversation.
Thank you. Lewis, to you, what policy changes would you like to see political leaders bring in terms of making sure that what's ending up on families' plates every morning and evening is better and more nutritious?
I think one of the things that is probably imperative in this regard is doing additional work with related to seed saving. One of the things that we're seeing globally is a decline in genetic diversity of very staple crops around the world. And as we rely on a smaller and smaller set of genetics, we're really cutting out a lot of the nutritional diversity that's needed in order to address the hidden hunger issue. So, whatever policy changes that could be made relative to encouraging seed diversity, particularly for improving and expanding seed banks within different countries, I think that is one of the best solutions in relation to adapting to climate change and to this issue of nutritional dilution and integrity going forward.
Thanks, Lewis. Matin, to you, it strikes me as amazing that there's so little media coverage of this. I mean, we see lots about climate change, we see lots about rising sea levels, but the impact on our food and it becoming less nutritious, this just does not get the coverage.
Right. I mean, there's definitely under coverage of this, but we're talking about a future problem which also exists today. I mean, the hidden hunger is real. It's real today for large parts of the population, and coming up with those negative predictions about it's going to get worse, even though it's true, it's probably not getting the media traction that it would need. So obviously, it's not only about future problems; it's about solving current problems and doing things more sustainably and resilient to at the same time reduce the risk of future problems. And I very much agree with Louis that diversity in terms of varieties, but also diversity in terms of the crop species is needed. And we definitely need better technologies to make farming more resilient, more robust, and at the same time more nutritious, and that's something where also new genomic breeding technologies certainly have a role to play.
Thank you. Shumone, to you, in addition to the nutrient content going down, the good stuff, we're also seeing reports that some of the bad stuff, toxins, emerging and increasing, and that's clearly very, very bad for our bodies.
Yes, absolutely. In fact, incidentally, this past year, my group has been doing quite a lot of work looking at heavy metals and inadvertent consumption of different types of toxins, such as lead or indeed mercury, that we take in through the diet. And in fact, I think here better legislation is required across jurisdictions to really track the sources of different foods, be that crops or be that seafood, in order to ensure that there are safe levels of all of these toxins, or where possible, none at all, in the foods that we consume. So I think this starts with awareness. it needs research, but certainly requires legislative policy to safeguard the public, because we may be achieving nutritional adequacy on one hand, but on the other hand, there may be inadvertent or even unknowingly consumption of heavy metals, which will have untoward effects, particularly on aspects of cognitive health, so on and so forth.
Shumone, just while you're there, what's the impact of a human body consuming more lead than it's meant to? I mean, we're poisoning ourselves on our plates.
Yes, so I think that the body has quite a lot of capability to rid itself of unwanted toxins. So as our bodily functions are all in order, if our liver is working properly and so on, so we will actually remove quite a lot of these environmental toxins from the diet. But it is a dose response related issue. So beyond a particular critical point, there is a gradual accumulation of heavy metals in the body's tissues, and that over time has a cumulative impact. So the earlier in life we can reduce or start reducing exposure, the better. But again, I say this goes back to awareness, and that awareness needs to be based on data. So we do need the research data from foods and food production, particularly sources of food production, in order to do adequate risk assessment. And only then can we employ, through policy, effective risk management.
Thank you. Lewis, to you, it strikes me there's quite a strong argument here for more education so that the public are better aware and informed of what's going on with the food on their plate.
Absolutely. I think that's a very important point, and I think this is one of the things that at the policy leader level, at the governmental level, is something that we could really try to encourage. As you pointed out, one of the sort of silent aspects of the science is really related or not mentioned very much, is this effect that we have in terms of food supply and food quality. And in relation to food quality, just to carry on with the earlier mention, we had some specific data looking at rising temperatures related to arsenic concentration in rice. And we worked with Johns Hopkins University to project the cancer rates that would occur, especially for countries that rely on rice as a primary staple, and seeing that by 2050, by the end of the century, that those arsenic levels would increase the cancer rates for a number of Southeast Asian countries. So it is a question not only of nutritional content, but it is also a question of toxins. In addition to which, I'll just add very briefly for maybe something to think about, is that there are a lot of different medicines that are used by people, indigenous people around the world, that come from plants. What is the effect of rising CO2 going to be in the qualitative aspects of those medicinal parts, in addition to the nutritional aspect? And that's another, I think, very topical area that doesn't get a lot of attention. And really, given that there's about 1 billion people in the world that rely on plant-based medicines, something also to think about in the future.
Thank you, Lewis. That's fascinating. Matin, to you, just looking ahead, climate change appears to be only going in one direction. I mean, the food on our plate in years to come clearly is going to be less and less nutritious.
It's true, and as a matter of fact, we talked about supplementation earlier. So there are ways also of dealing with it that are easier accessible for richer people that are well connected to markets. Unfortunately, in low and middle income countries of Africa and Asia, many people don't have that option. So I'm really much more concerned about these poor population segments that cannot afford and won't have access and don't have access to these supplements as well, rather than us in Europe or North America, where we'll also see problems, but probably not to the same extent because we're relatively richer and can always afford some alternatives. So we do have problems ahead, and for fairness reasons, we need to deal with those problems for the benefit of poor population segments in particular.
And that's a good point as well, Shumone, isn't it? The developing world will be disproportionately affected by all of this.
Absolutely. There's an initiative that we've had the privilege of running for several years known as the Mobile Teaching Kitchen, and that focuses on particularly marginalized populations and achieving micronutrient adequacy at low cost. So, what we have discovered is that if we can really foster the right level of education and awareness, as well as skills in terms of food selection within a budget, knowing where food is coming from, but also moderating food preparation in a way to enhance nutritional quality, it is possible to get all of the day's micronutrient requirements onto a plate within accessible and affordable limits.
Shumone, thank you. And my thanks to Lewis in Maryland in the United States and to Matin in Germany as well. Remember, you can see more discussion and debate on our YouTube channel. Just search for Roundtable TRT World. But for now, from me, Enda Brady, and all the team here, goodbye and thank you for watching.